What's going on, guys? In this video I'll be unboxing this right here, the Zcam E2-S6. I just got this in today, as well as some Canon lenses and some other accessories for it. I'm super pumped. Let's get right into the unboxing. All right, so here's the box right here. Let's go ahead and slide this thing open. This right here, I bought it to keep. This is gonna be my new YouTube camera, my new music video camera, and basically all my, I guess, more professional style of work I'm gonna be using this for. So I'm super pumped to get this thing in. So far I'm loving how this looks. It actually looks really well packed. It reminds me of like an iPhone. Limited warranty, FCC caution, and then Zcam flagship series start guide. So this is the E2-S6, so it's the Super 35 6K sensor. I figured that was a really good middle ground because I couldn't afford the F6, the full frame 6K sensor, but I figured the S6 would be a perfect middle ground. You know, it's still a pretty good sized sensor, and it has a bigger variety of lenses and cheaper lenses than a full frame camera. So that's what I opted with, and should work out just great. So let's get this thing out of here. It looks like it just comes with a really minimal amount of stuff, actually. So first things first, we got the antenna here. So this is to like connect you a phone or a monitor over Wi-Fi. Next up, we got these two cables right here. This is a AC adapter right here. This right here is an adapter. I believe it's a 2-pin LEMO port to DTAP. And then I believe that's everything in here except the camera. So let's pull this out right here. The E2-S6, and there we go, the box is empty. And this is a lot smaller than I expected it to be. It's actually kind of crazy. Over here. So if we compare it to the X Pro 1 right here that I have, it's basically like the same size. And this is just, you know, a small APS-C size mirrorless camera. So it's pretty small of a body. It's definitely compact and heavy. It's all made out of metal. Honestly, I don't know if there's any plastic on this body, which is super nice. Really good build quality. There it is. This is the Canon Ef Mount right here. There we go. Lens is locked on. This is a really good size. You know, once you get a cage on, once you get the battery on the back, monitor on top, I mean, it's definitely a dense and small camera, but you know, it's not gonna take up a whole bag. It's not gonna, you know, be a typical cinema camera, you know, per se. It's still a really compact camera, which I really like, you know, especially my camera bag and that type of thing for transporting. It's definitely nice to have a small camera like this, but that's how it looks right now. I'm gonna get back to you as soon as I get my batteries in and test it out a little bit, but that's it for the unboxing of the Zcam S6. All right, what's going on? So it's been a few days since the unboxing, and I actually got back from my first video shoot with the Zcam S6 a few days ago, as well as I got my rig kind of together now, so I'm gonna go more in depth on what my whole setup is here in a second. But first things first, I do have some first impressions of the Zcam S6. Now, this is not a full review video. This is just first impressions. I will be doing a full review, as well as a whole bunch of other videos about this camera in the future, so stay tuned for those. This is gonna be my first impressions from my first shoot with this camera. And so to start things off, I think this is a fantastic cinema camera. It really does everything that it's meant to do, and it does it really, really well. So I want to start off saying that this camera is awesome. I really enjoy using it so far. So let's get right into some first impressions. So the first thing I'm going to bring up is the rolling shutter with this camera. So it has definitely a good amount of rolling shutter when you're panning side to side and stuff. And it's not unusable, but it's just a little bit annoying, especially when you do handheld work and a lot of fast panning. It's definitely an issue. Now there is a low jello mode, which I haven't gone too in depth in, which is why, you know, I'm just bringing this up real quick on my first impressions. Just something I noticed. I haven't done a whole bunch of testing yet, so I wanted to bring that up, is that there is definitely a lot of rolling shutter with this camera. And I've heard the F6, the full frame 6K Zcam isn't as bad with rolling shutter, and I've also heard that the M4 and the E2 and the Micro Four Thirds system Zcams aren't as bad. So I think it's mostly an issue with just the S6. But again, it's just first impressions. I haven't tested out, you know, ways to fix this yet, so I just want to bring that up real quick. And so the second thing I'm going to talk about is the recording options with this camera. There is a whole bunch of recording options with this camera, which is really nice, and it's something that Me personally, coming from DSLRs, you know, I'm recording with the EOS RP right now. I've had a Canon EOS R, a Sony a7 III. Those are the main cameras that I typically use. So going right to a cinema camera like this, there's a whole bunch of options for recording for frame rates, resolutions, codecs, everything like that, which is super nice and useful. It really lets you decide exactly what you want to do and go from there, rather than having to work with what you have like with other cameras. Next up, recording and media. So this uses CFast cards, and it uses a whole lot of data. I knew it was going to use a lot of data, but I didn't really realize until I actually started recording with this, especially since I'm coming from DSLRs, which don't record as much data. So I usually shoot shorter form stuff like these YouTube videos, which don't end up being super long. You know, other stuff I do, I'll usually be around a computer. So in my mind, I said, okay, I'm just gonna go with a 128 gigabyte CFast card, and that should be enough for getting started for what I do usually, because I have a 128 gigabyte SD card that I use with my EOS RP to record these videos, and I never even use like half of it when I make YouTube videos like this. So I figured a 128 gigabyte CFast card is gonna be good enough to get me started. And right when I got to the shoot, right when I started filming, I realized that that is not enough. This camera just eats through media. So media is a big expense. I mean, this 128 gigabyte card was $70, I believe, and it's kind of like an off-brand, cheap brand one. And 256 gig, which is probably what I would recommend for this camera at a minimum, was like $150. So media is way more expensive than DSLRs and stuff like that with just SD cards, which is definitely something to get used to. But it's expected, obviously. It's a professional cinema camera, so you need professional fast media like that. So that's just something to note right there, especially if you're like me and you're coming from a DSLR, going into buying this camera. It uses a ton of media. Next thing I'm gonna note, the batteries in this last a long time. So I used off-brand NPF 970 batteries. They're the Power Extra batteries. I'll actually link them in the description if you're interested. But off-brand NPF 970 batteries. And I went the whole shoot. We were shooting for a couple hours. I used one battery, and towards the end I switched it out. It didn't say low battery. I didn't even know what the battery was at. I figured I'd switch it out just in case. And I didn't have any issues. The battery never died, and we were shooting for quite a while, and the camera was on like the whole time. So it's definitely a big difference coming from my Canon EOS RP, which that battery lasts like 30-40 minutes when you're recording. Like it really is an unbelievable difference in terms of battery life, which is super awesome, and also a ton of flexibility because these Sony NPF batteries come in so many different sizes and capacities and everything like that. There's ones you can get with USB ports on them, which is really great, and they're super easy to swap out. They're just right in the back here. That's not something that's internal, you have to slide into the camera or anything. So these are super nice. I'm really glad they have these batteries because they last a long time. Next thing I'm gonna bring up is Z-Log. So this records Z-Log 2 video, which is just Zcam's version of log footage. And it's super easy to work with, especially with the Z-Log plugin with Premiere Pro. Z-Log is super easy to work with, and I really haven't had any issues with it. It's definitely a lot better than S-Log, which is what I've recorded in before with my a7 III. A lot easier than that, especially with Zcam's plugin. I think it's really cool that they have a whole plugin for Premiere Pro. And I believe the plugin works for other softwares as well, like DaVinci Resolve and Final Cut, I believe. Don't quote that, but I've only used it with Premiere and it's worked great. So Z-Log is super awesome to work with. So the last thing I want to talk about when it comes to my first impressions is the monitor capabilities. So this does not have a built-in monitor, unless you want to count this little thing. It's like a GoPro size screen right here. You can technically use that to monitor your footage, but I wouldn't recommend it. I really wouldn't recommend it. It's super small. You can barely see anything if you're in focus or not. And so coming from that, it does sound like it's a downside not having a monitor on this camera. You can use your cell phone or tablet or anything like that as a monitor wirelessly, which is what I have this arm here for. So I can just put my smartphone right here and use this as a wireless or a wired monitor. And I actually really enjoy this because my cell phone's obviously always with me, so I can just slap it right on here, open up the Zcam app, and connect it wirelessly. And another good thing about that is, for example, for the whole video shoot that I was on a few days ago, I actually brought my iPad and I connected that wirelessly, and I was able to literally just bring the iPad anywhere in the room that I was recording with to, you know, show other people what the footage looked like, to show them, you know, how the shot looks and that type of thing. And I can literally just bring the iPad or the phone or whatever I've connected to it, just walk it around away from the camera and all that, which you cannot do with something like a regular monitor on a camera that you have to plug into the camera with an HDMI cable. You have to have batteries in it. You don't need any of that. There's almost no latency, which is super, super nice. That's one of the main things I was worried about with a wireless connection especially. You know, I've used it with a GoPro before, like with the wireless GoPro app, and there's always been like a 10-second delay or something like that. This, there's barely any delay. You can just pan back and forth and it'll be almost keep up with the camera, which is super, super nice. Sometimes there's little hiccups and a little bit of delays and glitches, but personally, I have not had an issue with it. I don't record any footage that is gonna matter if there's a little bit of a hiccup or a little bit of a delay. Now in your case, it might be different. You might need to get an HDMI monitor to have no delay at all if that's important to you, but for me, using a phone or a tablet as a wireless monitor is super, super useful. And there we go, that wraps up my first impressions of the Zcam E2-S6, just the first things I noticed from the first shoot that I went on with it. This is a super awesome camera and I'm glad to have it replace my EOS RP. I will be using this as my main camera for stuff like this, for the studio shots in my YouTube videos. So if you want to see more videos and footage with this camera, definitely stay subscribed because probably all my videos after this one will be recorded with this camera. But now I'm going to quickly go over my rig setup that I have here, and then that'll wrap up this first impressions video. So first things first, obviously it's the Zcam E2-S6 body, and I have a small rig cage wrapped around it here. And this is a really nice cage. It has the rosette right here for a side handle, which I don't have a side handle yet. I just have this top handle, but it's super useful. It has NATO rails on each side and a bunch of mounting points for basically everything. So I have the small rig cage, and also I'm going to link all the stuff that I'm talking about on this rig down in the description, so feel free to check that out. It will be Amazon affiliate links, so I will get a small kickback if you order any of these parts at no extra cost to you, so I'd appreciate that. Small rig cage, and then right here a small rig top handle. This is the rubberized grip one, and it's super comfy, super nice for, you know, getting these low down shots or really any sort of handheld shots with a top handle here. And then right in front of that I have this right here. It's like one of those magic arm things where it just has a clamp right here, and then you can move it around however you want, tighten it up, and it's really firm. And on the top of that I have a phone mount, so I can slap my phone right in here, right there, and then I can just move this around however I want and lock it down, and the phone stays right there. And so moving around to the other side here, I have a small rig cold shoe mount, and I use this for my Rode Wireless Go wireless lav mic system, which I use for all my videos. So it can plug right into the mic port on this side. I wrap the cable around and then just slide the receiver right into this. So that's nice for getting wireless lav audio or any sort of wireless audio, and that's what I use that for. And there's also a cold shoe mount on top here, so I can mount any sort of other cold shoe accessory. And then for the lens, I have a Canon 24mm t1.5 Cine lens. I actually got a set of these. I got a 24, 35, and an 85, which on the S6 is equivalent to about a 35, a 50, and like 105mm. So a pretty good set. I don't have a wide lens right now. 35mm equivalent is the widest lens I have. So I'm looking into the Tokina 11 to 16mm, which I've heard is a really good lens. I've been looking into that to cover the wide end, but these three Canon lenses work perfectly for any sort of medium wide to telephoto shots. I really had good luck using them in my last shoot. So I definitely recommend these lenses as of right now. Again, this is just first impressions for this whole setup. I've only used it for one shoot now, and then just, you know, some test footage in between. That wraps up my rig setup. I'll link everything in the description like I said, so feel free to check that out if you're interested in any of this stuff. And that's gonna wrap it up for this unboxing of first impressions video. Definitely stay tuned for my full review where I will have a bunch of test footage. I can't show any right now, but I will have test footage of the shoot I was just on and a bunch of other stuff in my full review. So definitely subscribe and stay tuned for that. And yeah, that wraps up this video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.